My name is Camille Brooks. I'm 38 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family.
For the past 3 years, Camille lived in silence until a shattered plate and a cruel insult struck her final breaking point. From that moment on, it was no longer a family conflict. It became a battle for survival. Secrets hidden beneath the bed. Cold-blooded schemes to have her locked away in a psychiatric hospital. All of it pushed Camille into a whirlwind with no escape. But then came a shocking confession, unveiling the truth behind a tragedy she never imagined. A truth that had shaped her entire life. And the price Camille had to pay was the very thing she cherished most.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
The sound of the plate shattering wasn't just noise. It was a detonation. A sharp, cracking blast that seemed to rip straight through the marrow of my bones. "Are you out of your damn mind, Camille?" Damon's voice boomed so loudly the cabinets rattled. His silhouette filled the doorway, broad shoulders, clenched fists, eyes burning with the kind of anger that never needed a reason. Then, everything cut to black. 30 minutes earlier. I've always believed that exhaustion isn't just something that sits in your body. Sometimes it sinks deeper, into your thoughts, your memory, the small spaces inside you that used to feel warm. For the last 3 years, I had woken every morning with the same familiar ache buzzing beneath my skin. I was tired, bone tired, soul tired, yet somehow still pretending to be fine. People talk about loneliness like it's empty rooms or unanswered phone calls. But loneliness, real loneliness, is sitting beside someone who promised to love you and feeling like you're dissolving while they thrive. Tonight was one more polished, glittering reminder of that. Damon had orchestrated the kind of corporate celebration that practically smelled like wealth. Crystal lighting, marble floors, champagne that flowed like an offering. Guests arrived wrapped in luxury, laughing loudly, congratulating Damon as if he'd single-handedly moved the stock market. And I, Camille Brooks, former accountant, former woman with ambitions, stood on the sidelines like a shadow someone forgot to turn off. My heels already hurt, my dress, a silver slip Damon chose without asking, felt like someone else's skin. As I watched him move through the crowd, all charisma and calculated charm, a familiar numbness washed over me. I didn't belong to this world anymore. Hell, I barely belonged to myself. My mind whispered the truth I tried so hard to ignore. Your skin is too thin these days. One wrong word, and you'll tear. Damon called me over with a glance, sharp, summoning. I stepped forward, sipping a stale glass of Prosecco, and prepared myself for the performance of a lifetime. And this, he announced to the circle of executives, is my wife, Camille. She's here for the tax deductions more than the celebration. Laughter, not loud, but deep enough to sting. I felt something crack inside me, a tiny fissure, a warning. My breath stopped, literally stopped. A small involuntary freeze, a survival instinct I didn't recognize until later. My hands trembled around the stem of the glass, and my throat tightened as if invisible fingers were pressing in. I swallowed the humiliation like bitter medicine and forced a smile that tasted like metal. "I'll give you all a moment," I managed, stepping back. But the room lurched, the lights blurred. For a split second, I thought I might collapse. That's when I heard it. A voice, steady, low, authoritative, cut through the noise. "You don't deserve that." I turned and saw him, Solomon Drake. He stood a few feet away, unbothered by the crowd, unreadable, observing everything with razor-sharp clarity. He wasn't flamboyant like Damon or his colleagues. He carried silence the way others carried expensive watches, like a statement. "You must be mistaken," I said softly. It was easier than believing someone had witnessed my humiliation. "No," he replied. "I'm not. And you need to know something." Before I could react, he gently guided me a few steps aside, far enough from Damon, close enough that his words didn't carry. "Your husband is preparing paperwork, documents he wants you to sign, documents that protect him and expose you." His gaze sharpened. "Don't sign anything." A small breath escaped me. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've seen good people get destroyed when they don't understand the math." He slipped a business card into my hand with subtle precision. And because you're smarter than he thinks. Look at his books, Camille. Start there. My heart thudded so loudly I thought others might hear it. Before I could respond, the warm air shifted. Damon appeared, jaw tight, nostrils flaring. He grabbed for my arm, but two men in black suits stepped between us. I didn't know whose security they were, but they stopped him. "Camille," Damon hissed, "we're going home. Now." His reaction was too sharp, too panicked, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't obey. I stepped back, chin trembling but lifted. "You're making a scene, Damon." His eyes widened, shock, disbelief, fury, all tangled together. No one ever called him out in public, especially not me. But I didn't wait to see what he did next. I walked out. The night air outside tasted like relief laced with terror. In the car home, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My phone buzzed twice, Damon's name flashing angrily on the screen. I didn't pick up. Couldn't. Inside the quiet of our house, our museum of expensive things and unspoken resentments, I sank onto the kitchen stool. My clutch fell open, and Solomon's card slid out like a secret demanding to be heard. Truth looks better in numbers. A single sentence, but it felt like the first breadcrumb on a path leading out of a forest I hadn't realized I was trapped in. My chest tightened. I used to live in numbers, breathe them, understand them with an instinct that felt like second nature. Damon used to praise that, until praising me became inconvenient. 3 years ago, he suggested I take a break. Then he insisted. Then he arranged everything so I didn't have a choice. I thought he wanted to care for me. Now I saw he wanted control. And suddenly, I needed desperately to feel something I hadn't felt in years: agency. I walked to the cabinet and pulled out the ceramic plate from our Charleston honeymoon. Soft white, hand-painted, magnolias across the center. Damon said it symbolized fresh beginnings. I saw something else in it now. A lie. A memory soaked in illusions. I held it for a long moment, long enough for the weight of what my life had become to settle in my palms. Then I threw it. The sound exploded, sharp, violent, liberating. Fragments shot across the hardwood like tiny meteors. I stared at them, breathing hard, heart pounding against its cage. That's when Damon stormed into the kitchen, fury etched into every line of his body. "Are you out of your damn mind, Camille? Have you finally lost it?" His voice thundered. But for the first time in years, it didn't drown me. I stood there barefoot among the broken pieces, and something inside me steadied. No trembling, no shrinking, no suffocating silence. Just a quiet, rising certainty, small but undeniable. This was the first crack in the walls he built around me. And through that crack, light was beginning to pour in. They say silence is golden. But that night, the silence in our home was something else entirely. It was the kind that screamed. The kind that curled around the corners of every room like smoke from an invisible fire. Damon hadn't followed me up the stairs after the plate shattered. Maybe he sensed something had shifted. Something small but irreversible. I locked the bedroom door behind me, not out of fear, out of finality. A soft declaration. That version of me? She's gone. I sat at the edge of the bed, Solomon's card pressed between my fingers. Truth looks better in numbers. It echoed in my head over and over, louder than Damon's shouting had ever been. My old self stirred beneath the dust of the last 3 years. Not the tired, trimmed-down Camille who smiled on cue and shrank under pressure, but the Camille who once ran her own accounting firm. The Camille who could smell a lie buried inside 10 spreadsheets. She wasn't dead. She'd just been sleeping. Morning came with too much sun and not enough clarity. Damon had left early, probably to play the part of the polished executive, while I sat among broken porcelain and broken illusions. By noon, I had made my decision. I called the number on the back of the card. A male voice answered, calm, measured. Solomon Drake. There was a long pause on my end. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath again. "This is Camille Brooks." His tone shifted immediately. "Good, I hoped you would call." "I'm not saying I believe you," I said. "But I'm curious." "That's all I need," he replied. Curiosity is the gateway drug to clarity. A strange, almost smile touched my lips. It faded quickly. "I want to know what he's hiding." I'll arrange everything, he said. No sudden moves, no drama, just eyes on the truth. He gave me an address, an office downtown, discreet. He said he'd meet me there tomorrow. As I hung up, the pit in my stomach twisted tighter. I wasn't ready for this, but I was more done being unready. The next evening, back at another of Damon's insufferable events, everything came undone faster than I'd expected. It was supposed to be a quiet affair, just close investors and partners. I came because Damon asked with that gritted teeth tone that meant, appear beside me or else. So I showed up, hair curled, dress black, smile locked in place like armor. I didn't expect to see Solomon again, not so soon. But there he was, already in the room before I arrived, talking casually with one of the partners. His presence was calm, but it vibrated under the surface like an exposed wire. He caught my eye only once, and that was enough. Damon was already 2 drinks in and louder than usual. When he reached for me, his hand brushed the back of my arm too tightly. I flinched, and he leaned in close enough for his breath to sour the air between us. "You better not embarrass me tonight," he whispered. But he didn't know. I wasn't the one about to be embarrassed. Because suddenly Solomon appeared beside me, seamless, effortless, and said, "I need a word with Camille. Business." Damon stepped forward like a loaded gun, but 2 security guards, yes, the same ones, cut him off again. My head turned sharply. Who the hell was this man that even Damon's wrath stepped back? He wasn't asking for permission. He was giving me a door, and I walked through it. Outside, Solomon led me down a quiet hallway, his voice low. "He's panicking," he said. "He knows I've contacted you." "And the security guards?" I asked. "My people," he said simply. "I don't play fair." Something fluttered in my chest. I hadn't had anyone stand on my side in so long. The sensation felt foreign, unstable. "He has you signing things," Solomon continued. "He made you a registered owner on several properties, but only the ones with hidden liabilities. You're standing in front of the bullets if anything collapses." I stared at him, cold creeping through my veins. "But why? Why use me?" "Because it's easier to hide debt under someone who doesn't ask questions. And because you were quiet. Until now." He pulled out a slim folder, sealed in an envelope. "What's this?" "A starting point. Your name is on more than you know." I didn't move to take it. He met my eyes. "You want justice. But before justice, you need information." I took the envelope. He nodded once and turned to leave. But just before disappearing down the hall, he said one last thing over his shoulder. "Don't act yet. Just read. Use your head, not your heart. That's where your power is." Back at home, Damon was waiting, already annoyed, pacing. "You disappeared again." At my event, I didn't respond. Just walked past him, clutching the envelope like a secret weapon. "I need you to sign some forms tomorrow," he said casually. "Just some asset protection stuff. Routine." My throat tightened, but I kept walking. I went upstairs, locked the door, again. This time, I sat on the floor of my closet, tore the envelope open, and began reading. At first it was just numbers, account names, addresses, terms I hadn't used in a while. Then it hit me. There it was, my name, scrawled beside a failing warehouse project, a $3.2 million lien, and a ballooning insurance risk, all hidden under our joint trust. But his name was nowhere near the liability section. He was shielding himself with my signature. I stared at the line item, then the next, and the next. Each one sliced me open in a new place. This wasn't carelessness. It was orchestration. 3 years ago, he began laying the groundwork for this. Around the time he convinced me to take a break from work. The same month we refinanced our second home. The month he started needing quick approvals from me for boring business stuff. It hadn't been laziness on my part. It had been trust. And that trust was now the rope tightening around my own neck. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't broken, but because I couldn't afford to fall apart. Instead, I sat up straighter, pulled out a notebook, and started listing every item. Every document I needed to request. Every file I remembered seeing but hadn't understood. I made a checklist the way I used to for client audits. I was waking up. I was remembering who I used to be, not a placeholder, not a pretty accessory, not a shield. A woman who knew how to follow the money, and this time, the money would lead to truth. I didn't sleep. I watched the shadows shift across the ceiling as the hours bled into dawn. In my hands, Solomon's file felt like it weighed more than just paper. It was 3 years of my life, folded into betrayal and wrapped in accounting jargon. Each page was another piece of my humiliation, hidden beneath the pretense of routine paperwork that Damon had slipped in front of me over candlelit dinners and lazy Sunday mornings. He never once flinched when I signed. He'd even kissed me after, like I was his accomplice. But I wasn't. I was the fall guy. At 5:42 a.m., I got out of bed, showered in silence, and dressed like I was going to war. No lipstick, no soft blouse, just a black sweater, dark jeans, hair tied back, and my wedding ring slipped into a drawer. Not because I was done, yet, but because I didn't want to see it while I worked. I printed everything Solomon gave me. I needed it in my hands, tangible, real. Then I pulled out my old Lenovo laptop from the back of my closet. It still had dust on it, but when it powered on and my login screen blinked to life, I felt something settle inside me. This machine used to be my battlefield, and I remembered every weapon. Solomon's office was in a nondescript brick building, nestled between a dry cleaner and a yoga studio. No flashy logo, no receptionist. Just a keypad entry and a steel door with a small placard that read, Drake & Co. He greeted me with a nod. "You look awake." "I'm angry," I replied. He handed me a thermos of black coffee. "Same thing?" Inside, his office looked like a control room for a private investigation unit. Whiteboards filled with names, flowcharts, arrows, tax ID numbers. An entire wall was dedicated to the Brooks structure. At the center of the diagram was my name. "You're the keystone," he said, pointing. "Remove you and everything topples." I stared at the web. LLCs, shell companies, dummy trusts. He planned this. Meticulously. He made me the liability, and himself the beneficiary. I leaned closer. He knew exactly how much I trusted him. Solomon didn't speak. He didn't have to. For the next 5 hours, we tore through it all. He showed me the backdoor transactions, the misappropriated funds, the consulting contracts signed with fake vendors, money funneled into an account listed under Marina Celeste Holdings LLC. That's right. He used my name to bankroll his mistress's lifestyle. "She has a company?" I asked, stunned. Solomon clicked a file. "She has 3. Marina wasn't just the girl in the robe. She was on payroll. She was on trips. She was listed as project lead on 3 commercial properties that I unknowingly helped secure loans for. My stomach flipped. "How long has this been going on?" I whispered. "Since your 2nd year of marriage. But it ramped up after you stepped away from your firm." I closed my eyes. 3 years of smiling beside him while he gutted me from the inside out. By the time I got home, the sun had started to set. Damon was in the living room, lounging in sweatpants, glass of bourbon in hand. ESPN mumbled quietly from the television. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Hey, babe," he said. "Dinner?" "I already ate." "Spa tomorrow?" "Maybe." He glanced over, assessing my tone. "Everything okay?" "Just tired." He nodded, satisfied with that answer. Then, as if on cue, he added, "Oh, those documents are still on the counter. Need your signature by Friday." I stared at the man I had once built a life with. And now all I could see was a liar in gym clothes. I didn't respond. I just went upstairs, past the kitchen, past the counter with the papers, and shut the bedroom door behind me. I spent that night in my closet. Not crying, not panicking, working. I pulled out my old file boxes from the back of the shelves, things I'd kept over the years out of habit, bank statements, business records, old tax returns. It started like a trickle, one irregular deposit, then another, then entire months where expenses were doubled, tripled, under categories that didn't match our actual lives. Damon hadn't just stolen, he'd trained me not to look. Every lie had been draped in a ribbon of love. "You're too stressed. Let me handle it." "I just need you to sign this quickly, babe. You don't need to worry your pretty little head." And I'd bought it. I'd let him turn my mind to mush. No more. By 3 a.m., I had reconstructed the entire financial timeline of our marriage. I had spreadsheets, flowcharts, and timelines. I'd traced every fraudulent transaction and flagged every offshore wire. I even found a cash-only deposit for a vacation rental in Turks and Caicos, 2 weeks before my birthday. When Damon said he had a work emergency and missed our plans, I had facts. I had proof. But most importantly, I had myself back. At 6:07 a.m., I stood in the kitchen with Damon's documents in my hand. He came in wearing his robe, yawning, oblivious. "Morning, babe," I smiled. The first real one in days. "Morning. You signed those yet?" I looked him right in the eye. "Not yet. I want to read them first." He paused. Just for a second. A flicker of discomfort. "You trust me, don't you?" My heart rate didn't spike. I didn't stutter. I just said, "I trust myself," and walked out of the room. That day, I sent Solomon an encrypted folder with every document I'd built. I titled it Operation Ledger. His reply came 5 minutes later. "She's awake. Now let's go to war." It started with the robe, white, silk, monogrammed on the collar, Mrs. Brooks. It had been folded at the foot of our honeymoon bed in Charleston, a gift from Damon wrapped in white tissue and promises. I remember running my fingers over the gold thread, thinking how it felt like the beginning of forever. But today it was draped over her shoulders. That was the first thing I saw when I pushed open the bedroom door. The second was her hair still damp from the shower. The third was the box, small, pink, and open, sitting on my bathroom sink. She turned around when she heard me. "Oh," Marina said, not startled in the slightest. "You're home early." She said it like she lived there, like I was the one interrupting her life. I stared at her, my mind trying to process the pieces, the robe, the test, the boldness in her voice. She smiled, slow, syrupy, victorious, and held up the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Positive. "Terrell's thrilled," she said, giggling like a teenager. "We're starting a real family, not just some placeholder situation." The word hit me like a slap. Placeholder. My throat closed. My pulse thudded in my ears. I saw spots, red and blinding, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't let her see even a flicker of how deeply those words cut. Instead, I took a deep breath, stepped back, and walked away. Down the hall, down the stairs, into the kitchen, and made a phone call. 35 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. 2 private security professionals stepped out, men I had quietly arranged through a law firm Solomon recommended. I hadn't thought I'd need them so soon. I was wrong. I greeted them at the door. "She's in the master suite. He'll be arriving shortly. I want them both out of my house tonight." The taller one nodded. "You want law enforcement on standby?" "No," I said coldly. "I want everything done by the book, every item logged, every word recorded. I want them to know this is not chaos. This is precision." They followed me upstairs. Marina was in the bedroom, sitting on my side of the bed, painting her toenails. When she looked up and saw the men behind me, she laughed. "Camille, seriously? Is this supposed to scare me?" "No," I said. "This is me reclaiming my home." I held out a formal notice, legal, notarized, and enforceable. She blinked as she read it, her bravado faltering. "You can't evict me, Damon." "Damon doesn't own this house," I interrupted. "It was purchased under a marital asset agreement. I had the title revised last month. His name isn't on the deed anymore." "You're bluffing," I smiled. "Try me." The guards moved in. One began carefully packing her things. The other held the front door open. She called Damon. He didn't answer. She called Terrell. Straight to voicemail. Panic bloomed on her face like a bruise. "You are insane. You know, that," she spat, standing up. "No," I said, voice even. "I'm just finally awake." When Terrell arrived 20 minutes later, Marina was standing on the sidewalk, clutching a garbage bag full of cosmetics and shoes. He stepped out of his car, confused. "What's going on?" I watched from the top of the stairs as one of the guards handed him a duffel bag, his. The rest of their things were stacked neatly on the porch. I didn't go outside. I didn't need to. I simply closed the curtains. Inside, the house felt different. Lighter, quieter. I walked through each room like a woman returning from a long exile. I opened drawers I hadn't opened in months. I took down photos that no longer made sense. I gathered the sheets from the master bedroom, tossed them in a trash bag, and set them by the door. The place still smelled like her perfume, floral, artificial, sharp. I lit a candle, one I used to burn during tax season when I worked 18-hour days from my home office. Lavender and amber, clean and grounded. This was my scent. This was my house. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. At 10:36 p.m., Damon finally called. I let it ring. He texted, "Why are you acting crazy? You can't just kick people out like that. We need to talk. I'm flying back tomorrow." Then another message. "You don't want to do something you'll regret." I stared at those words. Something you'll regret. The audacity, the entitlement, the certainty that I was still playing the same role. Quiet, obedient, replaceable. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent a single email to my attorney. Subject: immediate lock change confirmation. Body completed tonight. Send copy of revised asset ledger. Do not allow Damon Brooks' entry without my written consent. That night, I took a long shower, scrubbed my skin until the scent of rose water and deceit was gone. I dressed in a cotton t-shirt and flannel pants. Simple, soft, mine. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I pulled out my old journal. The last entry was from almost 2 years ago. It read, "I don't know who I am anymore. I keep waiting for Damon to come back to me, not the man who travels and drinks and disappears, but the man who kissed my knuckles and told me I was magic. But maybe that man never existed. Maybe I was just too in love to see the difference." I stared at those words, my own handwriting. A version of me so small I almost didn't recognize her. So I wrote a new entry. March 14th. Tonight I remembered that I'm not temporary. Not a placeholder, not someone's pause before the real thing. I am the whole story. And I've just turned the page. I slept well. For the first time in years, no one else is breathing beside me. No tension in my chest. No weight on my spine. Just stillness. Sacred. Sovereign. The next morning, I made my own coffee. Dark roast. 1 sugar. No one else's order to remember. I stood by the window, sipping it slowly, watching the sun rise over the lawn where Marina once sunbathed like a queen. I could almost see her there, robe fluttering, smug smile in place. But that image faded fast, because she was gone, and I was still here, reclaiming everything she thought she could steal. I always thought healing would feel like sunlight. But the truth is, sometimes it starts with shaking hands and a racing pulse. The day Tamara barged into my office was cold and overcast. A Tuesday, I think. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours the night before, and my head was full of ledgers and line items I hadn't seen in years. I was halfway through reconciling an offshore trust when I heard the shouting from the front desk. At first, I ignored it. I'd been working in the small co-working space Solomon had secured for me downtown. Anonymous enough to go unnoticed, clean enough to be efficient. The last thing I expected was for the past to come crashing through the glass doors in Louboutin heels. But there she was, Tamara Brooks, Damon's sister, queen of judgment, dealer of whispers and venom. And right now, absolutely unhinged. "You think you can just rob our family blind and walk away with your hands clean?" she screeched. "You conniving little thief," the receptionist froze. I stepped out of the private suite slowly, heartbeat hammering behind my ribs. "Tamara," I said, keeping my voice low. "You need to leave." "Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Damon told me what you're doing, going through his business, hacking into private files, making false accusations." "Stop," I cut in. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know you're trying to destroy him, and for what? Because he found someone younger, better, someone who isn't a bitter shell of a woman?" She stepped closer, jabbing her finger toward me. "You'll regret this, Camille. I swear on everything." "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from behind me, firm, steady. "Solomon." He stood in the hallway like a wall of calm. Tamara blinked, suddenly registering the man beside me. "You brought a lawyer?" she hissed. "No," Solomon said. "She didn't. I'm just the accountant." I almost laughed at the irony. Tamara made one last threat. something about calling her lawyers, the police, and God himself, before storming out in a cloud of perfume and self-righteousness. I stood there, trembling, long after she left. Solomon handed me a bottle of water. "She shook you," I nodded, swallowing hard. I wasn't ready. "She thinks you're still afraid," he said. "Let her." After that, I didn't speak for a while. I went back into the office, closed the door, and just sat there, hands folded, staring at the blank spreadsheet in front of me. Tamara's words had cut deep, not because they were true, but because once, they might have been. There had been a time when I was a shell, when I let Damon chip away at me until I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. But not now, not anymore. I opened my laptop, clicked into the audit file. The screen flickered. I began. At first, it was mechanical. Inputting data, cross-checking bank statements, matching vendor records. I barely noticed the hours passing. Then came the deeper digging. I flagged inconsistencies in cash flow. A bogus consulting fee paid to a non-existent firm in Nevada. International wire transfers masked as asset relocation. Luxury purchases under company cards marked as client engagement. There it was, clear as daylight. Fraud, deceit, the full anatomy of betrayal. But as I worked, something strange happened. I felt good, not just competent, but alive. The keys clacked beneath my fingers like music. My eyes scanned rows of figures with a precision I hadn't felt since the day I shut down my firm. I wasn't just analyzing numbers, I was rebuilding myself, one spreadsheet at a time. I lost track of the hours. When Solomon checked in, I had 6 monitors running, sticky notes everywhere, and half a dozen documents open across my desk. My hair was tied up in a messy bun, coffee cold beside me, posture hunched but eyes blazing. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm working," I said, without looking up. He smiled. "I see that." Over the next 3 days, I compiled over 400 entries of suspicious activity. I connected the dots between Damon's hidden LLCs and the siphoning of funds into Marina's accounts. I mapped out timelines, traced ownership changes, and built a digital folder so airtight it could suffocate in court. I found things even Solomon didn't know about. A secret property in Florida, a fake employee named S. Brooks drawing $8,000 a month, a shell corporation tied to Damon's fraternity brother, registered to a P.O. box in Wyoming, and then the smoking gun, an audio clip, buried inside a Dropbox folder linked to a legal review drive Damon had carelessly shared with his assistant. A backup of a recorded call between him and his attorney, discussing how to ease Camille into the idea of signing over power of attorney and adjust her medication if necessary. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just setting me up financially, he was planning to institutionalize me, gaslight me, strip me of agency, and take everything. I closed the laptop. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even blink. I just sat in the silence and whispered to myself, "You're going to be okay." Later that night, I emailed Solomon a zipped folder titled Black Box. He responded within 10 minutes. "Camille, this is enough to bury him." I wrote back, "I'm not here to bury. I'm here to take back what's mine." Then I shut the laptop. I walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. No makeup, dark circles, wrinkled shirt. But beneath all that, I saw her, the real me, not the wife, not the placeholder, not the broken thing Damon thought he could discard. I saw Camille Brooks, auditor, woman, survivor, and finally, I believed in her again. The past is a dangerous place, especially when it whispers sweet things in the voice of a man who once called you home. It started with a phone call. I was up late again, reviewing transaction logs under a dim kitchen light. My eyes were dry, my wrists sore from typing, but I felt steady, anchored by purpose, by clarity, by numbers that didn't lie. That's when my phone buzzed. Damon Brooks, 3 missed calls, then a 4th. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then it rang again. This time I answered. I didn't say hello. "Camille," he said, voice hoarse like he hadn't spoken all day. I remained silent. "I know I shouldn't be calling you, especially not this late, but I've been thinking about you," He paused, as if hoping I'd offer something, comfort, familiarity, even anger. I didn't. I miss you, he said finally. The words hung in the air like a hook dipped in honey. I knew better than to bite, but memory is a strange thing. It doesn't ask permission to come flooding back. I made mistakes, he continued. God, I made a mess of everything. I was selfish. I thought what I was doing made sense. But I see it now. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. That word, sorry, should have felt like closure. Instead, it cracked open something tender I'd spent months trying to stitch shut. Because once, his apologies were sacred to me. Once, I believed him without question. And part of me still remembered how that felt. I passed by Clearwater last week, he added softly. That stopped me. Clearwater Beach. Our first apartment. The place with roaches and leaky plumbing and the best sunsets I've ever seen. We had nothing back then but each other and a mattress on the floor. He knew what that place meant to me. He knew the trap. I thought maybe we could meet, he said. Talk, not about the business. Just you and me. And for a brief, aching moment, I wanted that. Not him, just the illusion. The memory of being held in the dark, of late-night ramen and Sunday crossword puzzles. Of a time when love hadn't curdled into power plays. I closed my eyes. I'll meet you, I said. We met the next day. My choice. A small cafe near the marina. Public, quiet, impossible to manipulate. I arrived early, sat with my back to the wall, wore a navy dress, hair in a braid, lips bare of color. I wanted to feel like myself, but untouchable. Damon walked in 10 minutes late. He wore his regret like cologne, strong, deliberate, impossible to miss. His suit was crisp, his smile subdued. For once, he didn't reach for a hug. Thanks for seeing me, he said, pulling out the chair across from me. We ordered coffee. His hands trembled slightly when he stirred in sugar. I noticed. So, I said, not offering more. He looked down, then up. I thought about writing everything in a letter, but it felt like cowardice. Probably would have read better, muttered. That caught him off guard. I deserve that, he said. We sat in a strange silence, not comfortable, not cold, just full. Then he started talking, about us, about who we used to be, how I made him feel safe when everything else felt like war, how I knew what he needed before he even said it. I didn't cheat because of you, he said, voice cracking. I cheated because I was scared, of getting old, of not mattering anymore. Marina didn't mean anything, not really. She was just easy. I winced. Not because of the confession, but because of the honesty I almost believed. I didn't expect you to wake up, he added. I thought you'd just keep drifting. You mean keep trusting? I said. He flinched. I don't want this to be how we end, he said. I still love you, Camille. I always have. Love. That word used to be a promise. Now it felt like a trapdoor. I thought about Clearwater, about how we used to sit on the porch with cheap wine and grand dreams, about the boy he was, the man I wanted him to become. I remembered the night he held my hand, while I cried over losing my first big client. How he told me, "You're unstoppable, Camille. You just don't see it yet." And I remembered the day he stole my name and signed it beneath $1 million liability. I looked him in the eye. I loved you, I said, fiercely, blindly, stupidly. He swallowed hard. But you don't get to use the past as an apology. You don't get to wave memory around like a white flag. That version of me you had, that trusting, forgiving, always smiling Camille, she's gone. Camille, I buried her, and I don't want her back. He reached across the table, fingers hovering over mine. Please, he said, barely above a whisper. I'm not here for reconciliation, I said. I'm here for clarity. He leaned back slowly, as if something inside him folded. Will you sign the dissolution documents? He asked. I nodded. I will. When? Noon, tomorrow, your lawyer's office. He blinked, surprised at how easy I said it. He smiled. And I realized he thought he'd won. He thought I'd softened, that my guard was down. He still believed I could be turned. That night, I sat alone on my back porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. The breeze smelled like magnolias. The wind rustled the trees gently, like a lullaby for the grieving, and I let myself grieve. Not for him, but for the years. For the girl who gave so much of herself she didn't even notice she was emptying. For the dreams she shelved. For the version of love she thought would save her. I took out my phone, scrolled through old photos, smiling faces, celebrations. A vacation in Maui where I thought he was just busy, not cheating. I didn't delete the photos. I just created a new album and labeled it Was. Then I put the phone away. The next morning, I packed the documents, made copies, reviewed the audio files, reread Solomon's summary of the financial fraud, highlighted the sections I planned to confront him with. Everything was ready. I stood in the mirror one last time before leaving. Navy blazer, loose curls, lipstick the color of dried rose petals. I looked like a woman going to court, but I wasn't. I was going to war. And Damon Brooks had no idea what was coming. Some wars aren't fought on battlefields. They're fought across polished oak tables, inside quiet rooms that smell like paper and pretense. They're fought with silence, with signatures, with people pretending they don't already know how this ends. I arrived early. The law firm was exactly what I expected. All glass, marble, and men in navy suits, who smiled without meaning it. The receptionist offered me water. I declined. My mouth was already too dry to pretend I was thirsty. The meeting room was colder than it needed to be. On the far wall hung a painting of a sailboat in choppy waters. Fitting. Damon arrived 5 minutes late, flanked by his attorney, a man with sharp eyes and expensive cologne. Damon was calm, collected, wearing a tailored gray suit that likely cost more than my first car. His hair was perfect, his smile almost convincing. "Camille," he said, like we were old friends catching up. I gave a polite nod. His lawyer gestured for us to sit. "Let's get started, shall we?" I took my seat slowly, placing my folder neatly in front of me. Damon watched me with that same calculating gaze I'd once mistaken for charm. I didn't flinch. "We're here to finalize the settlement," the lawyer began. "Division of assets, non-disclosure clauses, and voluntary release of liability." He pushed a stack of papers toward me. I flipped through the pages silently. Words like final and mutual and equitable jumped out at me like landmines. Legal poetry meant to make injustice feel like compromise. Damon leaned back in his chair, relaxed, expectant. He still thought I didn't know. He still thought I was desperate to be done, to settle, to sign, and disappear. He still thought I loved him more than I loved the truth. "You've had time to review the terms?" the lawyer asked. I looked up, voice calm. "I have. And? I won't be signing." Damon straightened. "Camille, don't do this." "You already did," I replied. I reached into my bag and pulled out a flash drive, placing it on the table like a chess piece. "Before we go any further, you should hear something." "What is that?" his lawyer asked, suddenly alert. I folded my hands. "A recording. Your client, discussing plans to render me mentally unfit in order to gain control of our shared assets." Names were mentioned. Dates, medications. Damon's jaw clenched. I met his eyes. "You remember, don't you, the conversation with your attorney and Dr. Reeves about how to ease me back into medication, how to document instability, how to, what was the phrase, secure long-term control." "You're bluffing," he said. I smiled. "It's a one-party consent state, Damon. I don't have to bluff." His lawyer reached for the flash drive. I pulled it back. "This is just a preview," I said. "The full file is in the hands of the state attorney, along with the fraudulent documents, tax, evasion reports, and proof of asset misappropriation under multiple shell companies." Damon's face turned to stone. "You plan to bury me," I said. "But you never expected me to dig first." The lawyer turned to Damon, voice low. "Is any of this accurate?" Damon didn't answer. Instead, he turned to me. For the first time in months, the mask cracked. His voice dropped into something darker. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said. "This makes me free." I stood. "I came here to give you one last chance to do the right thing, not for me, but for yourself." I pushed the unsigned agreement toward him. "But since you still think this is about forgiveness, I'll let the justice system explain it to you." As I turned to leave, Damon stood too. "You're bluffing," he repeated, though his voice shook this time. I paused at the door. "You used to know me," I said quietly. But you never respected me. That's why you lost. Outside the conference room, I took a deep breath. My legs trembled slightly, an aftershock of adrenaline. I found a bench in the hallway and sat for a moment, grounding myself in the weight of what had just happened. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Solomon. One new video uploaded. Client 738, Brooks conference room recording. I opened it. Damon. Earlier that week, speaking to his legal team. She's soft. She'll fold. I know her tells. If we go in hard enough, fast enough, she won't know where to look. And if that doesn't work, we play the instability card. Again. My hands went cold. They had planned it twice. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd rehearsed it. I downloaded the video and labeled the folder Final Trap. Then I called Solomon. It's done, I said. He paused. You ready for the next move? I looked down at my hands, steady now. I've never been readier. That night I went home and opened a bottle of wine. Not the kind Damon liked. Not the overpriced nonsense he used to swirl and lecture me about. Just a simple, honest red. I curled up on the couch with my laptop, reviewing the files one more time. But it wasn't about the evidence anymore. It was about closure. Every signature I'd been tricked into giving. Every smile I forced at charity galas. Every apology I whispered for things that weren't my fault. They were all here. And now they had names, dates, numbers, and consequences. Before bed, I wrote in my journal. March 22nd. He built a trap and thought I'd walk into it blind, but I brought a flashlight. And now, I'm building my own door out. I closed the journal, turned off the light, and slept, deep, unafraid, and untouchable. There's a certain silence that comes before a reckoning. Not fear, not dread. It's focus. A kind of calm that only comes when you know exactly what you're about to do. And you're no longer afraid of the fallout. I arrived 10 minutes early. This time, not as a wife, not as a woman seeking closure, but as Camille Brooks, the accountant, the auditor, and the storm they never saw coming. Solomon was already waiting outside the downtown law office, standing against the morning light in a charcoal gray suit, briefcase in hand, his face unreadable as always. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. I looked him in the eye. I've been ready for years. I just didn't know it. He smiled. Let's make it count. The room was the same as before. Same conference table, same chilled air, same view of the skyline outside the wall of windows. But the energy? Different. I could feel it. So could Damon. He was already seated when we walked in, flanked by 2 attorneys. Not the smirking one from before, but older men in darker suits who spoke in low tones and didn't look me in the eye. He didn't smile this time. He didn't speak. Good. Let silence be his opening statement. The lead attorney cleared his throat. Ms. Brooks, Mr. Drake, thank you for being here today. We understand there are some documents you'd like to submit into the record. I nodded. Yes. And I'd like to do that personally. I opened my case file. Page by page, I laid them down like cards at the end of a winning hand. Cross-verified bank transfers. Shell companies registered under dummy names. Credit card statements showing luxury purchases billed as logistics. Employment records for S. Brooks, a phantom employee on Damon's payroll. The attorneys flipped through the documents quickly at first, then slower, then they stopped altogether. Where did you obtain these? One of them asked. Everything was pulled from joint assets, I replied. Accessible by law and confirmed by my audit trail. And this? He asked, holding up a photo of a deed transfer. Marina's Miami condo. Purchased in cash, Solomon said, stepping in, with embezzled corporate funds, coded in the company ledger as a temporary storage facility, which I'm assuming is not a euphemism for a side girlfriend. Damon's jaw clenched. I wasn't done. I placed a small speaker on the table and pressed play. Damon's voice crackled through the room, recorded days before. She's soft. Just press hard. She'll break. She always does. And if she doesn't, we push the instability angle again. Make her look erratic. No judge will side with someone emotional. The room went still. For a full 10 seconds, no one breathed. Then I looked directly at Damon. That was your last move, I said. And it failed. One of his lawyers leaned toward him, whispering, rapidly. He shook his head. I could see it, the unraveling, the tightening of his throat, the sudden realization that this wasn't salvageable, not by charm, not by manipulation, not even by fear, because I wasn't afraid anymore. I came here today, I said slowly, not just to reclaim what's mine, but to correct the record. You didn't build this empire, Damon. You built a house of cards. On my name, on my silence, on my trust. I turned to the attorneys. I have no interest in destroying him. I just want what is fair, transparent, legal. And what is that exactly? One of them asked. Full financial restitution for every asset misappropriated under my name. Termination of all NDAs I was pressured into signing. Formal apology on record. And complete withdrawal from all claims to shared properties, businesses, or residual income. Damon opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. I'm not negotiating. I'm offering mercy. The next 2 hours passed in paperwork and tension. I watched the attorney's hands tremble slightly as they scanned page after page of evidence. I heard the scratch of a pen signing where they thought I wouldn't reach, and I felt for the first time in years, powerful, not because I'd won, but because I'd remembered who I was, Camille Brooks, the woman Damon tried to erase under forged signatures and whispers of madness. As we stood to leave, Damon finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost broken. You really hate me that much? I looked at him, this man who once made me laugh until I couldn't breathe, who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen, who turned into a stranger without ever leaving the room. I don't hate you, I said. I just stopped lying to myself about who you are. He didn't respond. What could he say? The silence this time was not mine. It was his burden, and I let him carry it. Outside the building, the air was crisp, bright. Solomon exhaled slowly, as if he, too, had been holding his breath for far too long. You did it, he said. No, I replied. We did. I opened my car, tossing my bag in the passenger seat, and looked up at the glass-paneled tower behind me. 1 year ago, I would have walked out of that room in tears. 6 months ago, I might have still questioned myself. Today, I walked out whole, and that changes everything. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, cross-legged, laptop open in front of me. I deleted the folder labeled Evidence, moved all case files into an external hard drive labeled Closed. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet. At the top I typed, Rebuilding Camille, the first column, Date, the second, Decision that honors me, and below that, the first entry, March 28th, walked into the fire, walked out with myself. There's something strangely gentle about collapse. It doesn't always come with screaming or chaos. Sometimes it arrives with the soft thud of footsteps on wet pavement, a clipboard in one hand, and federal insignias stitched into the chest of a windbreaker. The morning Damon Brooks lost everything, the sun never broke through the clouds. I sat in my car, parked just far enough away to stay unnoticed, but close enough to see everything. The rain had turned from drizzle to steady drops, streaking the windshield in rhythm with my breath. It had been exactly 9 months since the night I broke the plate. 9 months since I stood barefoot in my kitchen and realized my life, my marriage, my identity, my safety, was built on lies. And now, in the kind of symmetry only real life can script, I was here to witness the end of his performance. The first SUV arrived at 8:04 a.m. 3 marshals stepped out calmly, not in riot gear, not shouting orders, just purposeful and patient, as if they'd done this 100 times. They moved to the front porch with the certainty of people carrying law. From the second knock, I knew he'd open the door himself. Damon had always been obsessed with control. He wouldn't let someone else answer, not even now. He appeared seconds later in joggers and a t-shirt too tight for his aging frame. There was a moment, a fraction of a beat, where I saw it in his eyes. He knew not what exactly would happen, but that something was ending. I watched the moment the papers were handed to him. The visible tension in his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw, the way he scanned the perimeter, maybe looking for me. He wouldn't see me. He hadn't seen me for years. By 8:30, the asset team had arrived. Black vans, uniformed specialists, government seals on boxes. They walked right past the azaleas I'd planted 2 springs ago. The ones he told me were too much maintenance. And now their blooms brushed the sleeves of men cataloging everything he once claimed was his. The Tesla was the first to go. Then the watches. Then the hard drives. All documented. All sealed. All consequences. And still, Damon stood there, mouth tight, trying to stay composed, trying to argue through logic, charm, indignation. But the Marshals didn't care about his education, his real estate ventures, or the awards in his study. They cared about the court order. They cared about the truth I had spent months assembling, line by line, until the house he built on my silence began to fall. A small crowd started to gather. A couple from down the block paused mid-jog. Mrs. Alvarez peeked through her lace curtains, and a boy on his bike slowed to watch. It was quiet, like the whole neighborhood had collectively agreed this was worth witnessing. Not because they hated him, but because something in all of us craves seeing masks fall. And then, it happened. Damon stepped onto the lawn. The Marshals, behind him, his words, whatever they were, lost in the sound of rainfall and disbelief. And then slowly, deliberately, he dropped to his knees. It wasn't theatrical, it wasn't desperate. It was the posture of a man whose strategies had run out. His arms hung limp at his sides. His eyes scanned the sky like he was trying to wake up. Like this was a bad dream he could still escape. But it wasn't. This was reality. This was accountability. I stepped out of my car. No umbrella, no makeup. Just me, in a black coat and boots that squished in the grass. I didn't plan to move toward him. But something in me needed to stand in the rain too. To feel the same weight, the same sky, the same finality. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk and stopped. From where I stood, I could see the shape of him. Once tall, proud, dominant, now soaked, small, human. He turned, saw me. Even from a distance, I could read his face. Not hatred, not anger, but something harder to describe. Recognition, maybe even regret. I didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't flinch. I just looked. And in that silence between us, 100 conversations passed. The night he mocked me in front of his friends. The moment he made me sign the first fake form. The sound of my plate breaking on the floor. The echo of his voice saying, "You don't belong." Now, he was the one uninvited. Now, he was the one outside. Now, he didn't belong. Not in my house, not in my world, not in my future. And I didn't need to say it. Because the mud on his knees said it for me. I turned and walked away, the rain soaking through my coat, dripping from my hair, but I felt no cold, only closure. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, smaller, simpler, but entirely mine. The walls were bare, the fridge half empty, but peace had a sound I hadn't heard in years. It sounded like rain on a clean window. It sounded like silence with no tension. It sounded like enough. I made tea. Chamomile, opened my laptop, typed a single sentence in my journal. Today, I saw the end. And I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed to stop protecting him. I pulled a box from the closet, the last one I hadn't opened. Inside was a photo album, our wedding, honeymoon, anniversaries. I turned each page slowly, not to feel pain, but to witness it fully for the last time. When I reached the final page, I closed the book, took a deep breath, and placed it gently into the fireplace. I didn't light it, I just let it sit there. Not everything has to burn to be released. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. No dreams, no ghosts, just me. Breathing, free. Some endings come with thunder. Mine came with a pen, a phone call, and a porch light. It had been 10 days since the Marshals took Damon's empire apart. Since he'd knelt on our lawn, or rather, his lawn, in the mud, helpless and hollow. Since neighbors stopped pretending they didn't know and started whispering about karma with a little too much delight. And in those 10 days, I didn't gloat. I didn't post a single thing online. I didn't even respond to the flood of messages and apologies and barely veiled gossip from people who used to look past me. I just packed. Silently, carefully, one box at a time. Every item I kept was a choice. A sweater I actually liked, a chipped mug that had seen more truth than any dinner party, a half-finished journal, a flash drive labeled simply me. Everything else, designer shoes I never picked, handbags that screamed wealth instead of warmth, crystal vases that had never once held flowers, was gone, sold, donated, erased. I met Solomon on a Thursday afternoon. His office was unusually quiet. He slid a folder across the table. Final figures. After deductions, fees, and the asset sales, your total estate value is just over $15.2 million. I stared at the number. It felt unreal, almost comedic. How much money had been wrapped around my silence all those years? But silence wasn't my currency anymore. I flipped to the second page, where the new entity was outlined in neat legal fonts: the Camille Brooks Initiative, a nonprofit foundation for women recovering from financial abuse, coercion, and economic isolation. I signed, slowly, clearly. Then I exhaled like I hadn't in years. Solomon watched me. "You're giving away nearly half." "I'm not giving it away," I said. "I'm reclaiming what it was meant to be. And the rest? A new home, a real one, a quiet life, and enough left to build things that can't be stolen." He nodded. "You know, very few people who win ever walk away with their soul intact." I closed the folder and stood. That's because they mistake revenge for healing. The next morning, I visited Clearwater Beach, the same spot Damon once brought me to when he still knew how to be gentle. I sat on the same bench where he'd once kissed the top of my head and whispered things about forever. But this time, I was alone. And the silence, it felt like peace, not absence, presence. I reached into my coat and pulled out the last physical piece of our past, a framed photo from our wedding. For months, I'd held onto it, unsure whether to burn it or keep it. But now I realized I didn't need to do either. Instead, I set it gently on the bench, face down, and placed a smooth palm-sized stone on top. Let the ocean take it someday, or the wind. Let it return to the earth like every other illusion we outgrow. On my way back to the apartment, I stopped by a women's shelter Solomon had quietly helped fund. No cameras, no press, just me, sitting in the back row of a group session, listening. A woman named Lydia spoke about her husband draining their joint account to pay for a mistress's rent. She cried, then laughed, then said, "But I found a new job, and I don't need his name on my mailbox to be a whole person." I clapped with everyone else, but inside, something bloomed. Like jasmine after a storm. That evening, I brewed chamomile tea in the chipped mug I'd kept. I sat at the window of my nearly empty apartment and opened the journal I'd once scribbled numbers and questions in. I wrote, May 23rd. Today, I gave my past a name. Tomorrow, I give my future one too. Not everything that breaks is meant to be fixed. Some things are meant to be rebuilt differently. I picked up my phone and stared at the contact I hadn't called in nearly 4 years. Mom. The last time we spoke, she warned me, told me Damon had darkness behind his smile. I hung up on her that day. Now my hands shook as I pressed call. 3 rings, then her voice, older, but still mine. "Camille," I tried to speak. Failed, swallowed. Then, "Mama, I'm coming home." She didn't say anything at first, just a long, soft inhale. Then, "I've been leaving the porch light on. I left the city just before sunrise. No note, no post, just one final walk through my apartment, one final glance at the walls that had heard me scream, sob, and finally laugh again. Before I locked the door, I whispered, 'Thank you for holding me while I healed.'" The drive to my hometown was long but calm. Wheat fields blurred past like pages. The radio played soft Motown, songs I hadn't heard since childhood. And somewhere along that road, I began humming. Not because I was happy, but because I was whole. I pulled into the driveway around dusk. The porch light was on. The front door opened slowly. My mother stepped out in her worn cardigan and slippers. Her eyes filled with something that wasn't quite forgiveness. It was something stronger. Understanding. She opened her arms, and I stepped in. That night, I slept in my childhood bed. The mattress was too soft. The room still smelled like lavender sachets and old books, but I slept. Without dreams, without fear, without armor. The next morning, I walked barefoot into the backyard. Dew kissed my toes. Sparrows fluttered in the trees. I turned my face to the sun and said aloud, I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace. That's the thing about grace. It doesn't come when you win. It comes when you let go. And that's where the real story begins. There are acts of revenge that require no bloodshed and no enemies kneeling in apology. There are victories that come without applause, quietly blooming in the heart of a woman who was once broken, but rose again with her intelligence and her kindness. Camille didn't choose hatred to end her story. She chose freedom. She chose to return. She chose the light. And you, if you've ever been through pain, whether it was betrayal, deceit, or being silenced, offer yourself a gentle reminder. You don't need an apology to begin healing. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I once forgave, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Your story might be the light for someone who's still lost. And perhaps it will be the beginning of a homecoming, just like Camille's.